I'm Carla Reyes, Associate Professor of Law at SMU Dedman School of Law, and your moderator this afternoon. I was going to say this morning, but this afternoon. I'm going to introduce our panelists in alphabetical order, which is not the order in which they sat down, but nevertheless, if you can wave when I talk about you so they know who you are, that'd be great. We first have James Aman, who's a protocol engineer at Constellation Network, where he leads federal project and protocol development. He holds a PhD from Rice University in ultra-cold atomic physics and has served as a teaching professor for interdisciplinary blockchain course, introducing students to the technical and business impacts of decentralized technologies. He's been active in the space since 2015. Next is Lasse Clausen, who is a former entrepreneur and the founding partner of 1KX, a crypto investment firm focused on ecosystem growth. Then Chrissy Hill, who has acted as a trusted advisor for 4 great British names, Dr. Gavin Wood, Sir Tony Blair, Barclays, and Linkladders. Originally from Charleston, South Carolina, she moved to London in 2002, and over the past 3 decades has gained broad exposure across the global legal, regulatory, investment banking, charity, not-for-profit, and now Web3 sectors. She now focuses on steering the leading technical contributor to Polkadot through legal, operational, and regulatory challenges in the emerging technology space as Chief Legal Officer and Interim Chief Operating Officer of Parity Technologies. And last but not least, Haseeb Qureshi is managing partner at Dragonfly and is a longtime technology-focused crypto investor. Haseeb was previously a general partner at Metastable Capital, which was now acquired by Dragonfly. And previously, he'd founded a stablecoin startup, was a blockchain engineer at Earn.com, which was acquired by Coinbase, an anti-fraud engineer at Airbnb, and was previously a top 10 globally ranked professional poker player. He has taught a class on Web3 entrepreneurship at UC Berkeley and is widely recognized for his technical expertise in crypto. So, topic of our panel is DAOs and DeFi, and I want to start with the first of those 2 separate but interrelated topics, namely DAO. And I want DAOs. Want to ask in particular, what do you all see as the biggest opportunities and hurdles for DAOs as we move into 2025? Lasse?
I think I might jump straight into the hurdles and the challenges of DAOs. So we've been, for example, we've designed and created, as far as I know, the most successful governance framework for a project called SAFE, for example. So we've been very involved with DAO governance. And, I don't know if anyone here, did anyone here see these public hearings for SpaceX when they asked for more launch licenses in California? So this is a problem that also affects DAOs, that you have this sort of adverse selection where, and I think in local administration this happens a lot, where unfortunately the people that have the most time on their hands tend to be the ones that are not necessarily the brightest of society, and they sort of like, they basically take over the mind share. And I think that's a very generalized problem with sort of public administration, whenever you have participatory administration. And in DAOs, it's basically supercharged. So that is generally a really big problem that we see. And if you look at the space where we came from, so MakerDAO was really the first sort of big public governance where 100,000 token holders were expected to vote on everything. And then this concept, actually with Index DAO, sort of started where they had working groups. And you're essentially going to sort of this delegation model as well, which we really also have in the real world, where you're saying, okay, this is someone who's doing it full time. They might be a bit more knowledgeable because of that, because they're spending all day long with these issues, and we're delegating it to them. And I think here you still have a problem that you will generally have this adverse selection effect, but at the very least, it's just one vote away from switching them out. So you have a bit more of a competitive pressure, whereas even in local politics, et cetera, you tend to have these 2-year, 4-year cycles. And basically, once you realize they might not be the right person, then you still have to put up with them for a couple of years. So at least here, it's extremely fluid, and essentially you can switch out, token governance can switch out sort of these delegated politicians, so to speak, basically in a matter of hours. So I think this is kind of the high-level challenges, like how do you attract really tier 1 talent, really ideally the smartest people to think about these issues and contribute to them? How do you attract them? I don't think this is necessarily entirely solved yet.
So it sounds like you're quite bearish on DAOs.
Big challenges ahead still, yes. I would
Okay.
say.
Would you say you're bearish?
It's getting better. No, there's progress. So I think that's why I mentioned the MakerDAO example, right? So it was like absolutely terrible. And now we're sort of bit by bit, it is getting better. And the advantage here also is that it's a very iterative and experimental field. So, it's not set in stones, and basically every project is open to experiment. And again, overall, the great thing about crypto that everything's open source out in the open. And so if one project sort of falls on their face because they have the wrong governance structure, everybody kind of can learn from that if they pay attention and actually sort of innovate on that. So I'm almost cautiously optimistic, I would say.
I would also, from a Polkadot perspective, I mean, we are the world's largest DAO, and OpenGov is our governance model, and it is totally self-enacting, censorship resistant, and also on-chain. And one of the things that we found since OpenGov came into effect, which is our second governance model, of June of last year, is that coordinating the chaos is definitely an opportunity as well as a hurdle, right? Because you do get a small number of people, I would agree, talking about the issues, voting on the issues. You want to increase the number of people who are involved, but you also want them to be multidisciplinary, because I think bringing that view into conversations about the proposals that will be enacted by the DAO, that will be voted on by the DAO, because it's not all technical, right? And there's so many use cases beyond DeFi, which I know we came to talk about, but really the use cases are only limited by our imagination. So in order to maintain that community and bring more people into the community, I think it comes with education, also making just what we're doing not so opaque to other people, so we do get the best minds around the table making decisions, because the best minds aren't all in this industry. They're multidisciplinary, multi-industry, and it's something if we want to drive adoption, we got to reach out and make that happen. Yeah. So I think DAOs allow us to do that in various ways. We just need to refine them a bit.
I think it's fascinating that governance came to mind for you both as both the hurdle and the opportunity, in part because of the events of this week with a decision out of California in the Lido DAO case, where it was suggested that it's a general partnership, and with the boundaries of the partnership to be determined yet, but suggesting perhaps that DAOs need legal wrappers more and more. At least that's been the commentary that's followed in the wake of the decision. And as a business law professor, I object slightly to the term legal wrapper because that's odd. But anyway, the idea then, I wonder about this concern about governance, if indeed you're being pushed towards legal wrappers for DAOs, doesn't that fix it a little bit? Because entity law comes with built-in governance choices that you have to follow if you want the legal wrapper.
So I too don't love the legal wrapper term. And actually I heard a suggestion from a regulator from Gibraltar that it actually should be called a DAO execution vehicle, a DEV, which obviously has a,
nice.
Nice symmetry there. And again, in Polkadot, for a long time, whether we needed one was under discussion. And of course, from a pure Web3 philosophical perspective, there's some tension there. But the community did vote to enact and voted on the proposal for the DAO execution vehicle, the wrapper, in June, and it's really just coming online. We're putting through some of the first proposals to be enacted by the DAO right now, working on the operating model. You have to think about a lot of things like, would you have a token holder defense fund, for instance? Who are the directors? And how, what's the in-house staff going to look like? And I think in order, again, to drive adoption, to make people feel like they can relate to what we're doing, and also get businesses who want to do work with us, with an entity that has an address, with people they can speak to. I mean, these are normal things. That's where these wrappers are very useful, but obviously, again, from the legal and regulatory perspective, a lot of work to be done.
I think it's also worth reiterating for people who might be coming into this conversation not really knowing what the hell we're talking about. Like the history of DAOs, right, from the beginning, the vision that people had of what DAOs are and why they matter, it was almost like a bunch of randos on the internet are going to come together in this sort of spontaneous formation and just build something together. And we sort of imagined they'd all be pseudonymous, nobody would really know who anyone else really was in real life. And so the idea that, okay, well, the state is going to come in and intervene, lock somebody up, shut down a website, it's just not going to be possible because it's sort of an I am Spartacus moment where you can't tell who anyone is, you can't really do anything to us because we're this, we're this loosely organized blob, right? That's what people imagined, I think, in their minds, why DAOs were so powerful. And then the state started getting interested because people were defrauding each other and all sorts of craziness. And people started getting, it turns out most people were not that pseudonymous, and you could figure out who some people were. And people started getting legal summons, and venture funds started getting lawsuits. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh wait, actually, it's pretty easy to figure out who a lot of these people are. And the state is very interested in what we're doing. And okay, we kind of can't pretend we live in this sort of non-corporeal, internet world that is very different from the real world.
How bots started serving people.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And
so I think a lot of this stuff, it's all part and parcel of, I think, the same story for a lot of crypto, is that crypto, I think, was very naive back in 2017, 2018, 2019, when we first were thinking about DAOs, even when we were thinking about DeFi. Once upon a time, people thought that DeFi was going to be completely untethered from the traditional financial world, right? And today, the largest asset in DeFi is USDT or USDC, which are, literally, there's banks custodying all the US treasuries that are backing the vast majority of all the assets held in DeFi. So the lesson we keep learning again and again is that this stuff is not as, it doesn't live as much completely in the separate plane as we once imagined that it might. And these are all these tensions and all these renegotiations that are taking place are part of crypto growing up and figuring out how to make that work in the real world.
Did we figure out what happened? I think it was BZX DAO, where everyone was summoned because they wrote in the Discord chat, right? Because that comes back to the question: can you might identify some DAO members, but can you actually abroad make them liable? And actually, I don't know off the top of my head what actually happened, but right, the enforcement agency sent a message in the Discord saying you hereby have been summoned, right? But I don't know really what the outcome was.
the Oki DAO case, but then that actually didn't end up being decided in the end, the Oki DAO case. So.
That's right.
They won. They
determined.
appealed that as the proper way to serve, and then but there was an easy fix. The California civil procedure said you just have to serve some members of the DAO, and there were several that they knew, and so then they served them, and then it's on them to tell everybody else. But that's like normal partnership service method, right? The question really is, should it be treated as a partnership at all? But it's interesting, I think, is just moderator commentary maybe, is that it immediately, when we talk about legal wrappers, the thought is to think about the regulatory state coming in. But legal wrappers or business entities is private law. It's based in contract, really. And I struggle as a business law person to understand the deep clash that you mentioned existed between smart contract-based entities and contract law. But it's just a question, I guess, a philosophical one perhaps. But if in fact DAO wrappers do become used more often in light of all of the regulatory activity or the private law suits like the one in California, the question then becomes, will that impact DeFi in ways that we don't like, in ways that we do like? What do we think might happen as a result?
Yeah, I'm primarily a developer, so in the weeds of like building these things, and to your point, Haseeb, we really do kind of have this naive point of when we're creating these tools, like, we're going to exist in a vacuum and completely redefine if you really back out all the way, Bitcoin is like its own digital nation state. It has a currency, it has some loose form of governance, but every nation state has to exist with every other nation state. So not only these digital nation states they interact with one another, but they also have to interact with the real world. But to that end, where I worry a little bit about as we make these legal wrappers more codified and learn how to actually exist in this infrastructure, we we already saw that in DeFi, there are lots of scam types of activities going on, and rug pulls have become very, very common. And many of the people that participate in these token launches don't understand what they're getting involved in, or maybe do and are hoping that they get out before the whole thing gets pulled out. And could we, by chance, see something like that actually happen in these DAO organizations or DAOs, where there's like codified legal liability that somehow gets bought in by a bunch of people and then pushed off as other, early adopters pull out, and that leaves the repercussions to fall on unsuspecting folks who didn't know what they were necessarily, or maybe didn't have the technical expertise to get involved in. So I don't, just that's one thing I worry about, is like that as we figure out how we resolve these physical and digital.
It turns out that there was a period where it was really hard to back anonymous developers, and that's the cool crypto native thing. Turns out that really brings out the worst in people when they feel like nobody's watching and they can do anything they want. So I think that's already a big first one, that you do actually have some people's social capital at stake, right? And you can't just steal money and nobody will ever find out. So I think that was an important first step, that you had some sort of connection with the real world. It's like, okay, I know this, the core team's face, we know their names, we roughly know where they live, and if they really just defraud everyone outright, like, some government agency will come after them. I think it was an important first step, but I don't know if you remember this, probably, right? There was at least a year where everyone, it was very, very hard to back these anonymous developers, and I was like, I don't think this is going to be, didn't turn out well.
Accountability is always important.
That's right. I mean, but that being said, like to Lasse's point, it is at the core of the crypto ethos, right? Satoshi Nakamoto was pseudonymous. Were it not for that, initial, kind of animating spirit behind this whole movement, none of this would exist. And so you have to, Lasse and I are both investors. As an investor, you have to respect the spirit of pseudonymity from which the space emerged. And for the first, call it 5, 6, 7 years of this entire industry, it really was the law of the jungle, in that, people, like, for the most part, law enforcement and the regulatory state just didn't really care, because crypto was just so small and it was just so kind of scattered around the world that for the most part, most crimes went very loosely punished. Only the really big ones, the Mt. Goxes of the world were things that are worth paying attention to. But the small stuff just kind of, happened on in the background. And I think as an industry, we're to some degree grappling with the fact that we're so big now that the whole world is paying attention. And the tools that we have and the kind of the legal constructs that we have are starting to catch up to the fact that, hey, we now actually have to answer difficult questions about, liability and, who's actually responsible in a DAO, where you have, decision makers and delegators and all, this complicated tree structure that we've developed for how most DAOs work. For corporate governance, it's a very, very well understood, history of case law that led us to where we are today. In DAOs, we're kind of figuring out as we go for most of these things. And, Lido, which I know that you mentioned as one of these cases where, investors, ourselves included, are getting sued because people are like, oh, you're in an unincorporated partnership and therefore you guys are liable for everything that the DAO does. We'll figure out what judges think of this in real time, and there's multiple cases happening in multiple jurisdictions, which tells that it may be, there may not be agreement about how these things ought to be treated.
So I just have a quick point on that. So do you think maybe then that, because cryptography is just a constant game of cat and mouse, right?
Yeah.
As soon as the attackers figure out something, defenders have to, make it different. Like quantum cryptography is a good example. But we already see the judicial system and regulatory state like struggling to even understand what we're doing and put strictures around it. I worry maybe that like crypto, the technology, there's just so much optionality in it that it seems like it might be too big a bear to or too big to wrap arms around in a way that isn't just I tweak one little protocol or like one little parameter, and now it just doesn't fit the use case that actually has some mapping to codified law.
I think that's why, for example, Hester Pierce's originally proposal of the sandbox was I think that's the right direction, where you say this is very new, you have 3 years to maybe operate in a gray zone. I think there's also some voices that are saying, actually, it's not SEC, it's not CFTC. Actually, all you should do is go after fraud, right? If people promise you 10% a day in returns, things like that, they rug pull, you go after that. And I agree. I hope we get a little bit of time for this to ossify a little bit, and then we make attempts at regulating this, because if it's too early, it's definitely going to kill any future experimentation, anything beyond that now.
And I think if you look around the world, because although I sound like this, I've actually been in London, as you said, for 22 years, and of course I'm looking at what's happening globally. I also interact a lot with founders all around the world who are thinking about setting up their own projects. And those jurisdictions which are attracting the most innovators, the most builders, are the ones that have the regulatory sandboxes. Gibraltar is a great example. Also, you've got the UK, you've got Malta, you've got the EU. I mean, you've got a whole list. And then there's also what the UAE is doing, Singapore. And there's that encouragement of innovation and experimentation. And I think certainty. It leads to certainty. And that's one of the things that, from the outside looking in, as a very proud American, certainly that, it dismays me, that lack of certainty. Because from a very basic perspective, in order to build a business plan, which y'all will know, you need certainty, because you can assign a dollar value to that, or a euro value, or whatever currency, or pound value. And so I think that the more sandboxes that pop up, the more engagement with regulators, with legislators to educate them. Because I think also, I didn't grow up in tech. I came to it 3 years ago. It was very intimidating at first, because I was like, GM? All the acronyms, the different ways to refer to kind of like fiat. I mean, it's just money. Why do we have to call it fiat, right? But these are very basic things that when you first come in, of course, 3 years into it, I'm in a different position, but you isolate people. And if you are not looking to reach out to those who are attempting to regulate, establish a common language, make it very engaging and not so opaque, and help them understand that speed of innovation, then it falls on us as an industry, actually, because you have to reach out your hand to bring people with you.
The problem with this was that actually all the people that engage in good faith in the US with regulators got killed for it. And everyone who just didn't actually had the advantage of. So I think there's also some I would say, trust building, I think, to be done, because the best actors engaged in good faith and immediately got sued basically by the SEC for it.
Yeah.
That's right. And there's a dial that every government is setting between sort of safetyism and investor protection to let it rip and just full on innovation plus scams, right? And you kind of get both they're cut from the same cloth on some level. And the U.S. under the Biden regime, it's just been max safetyism, which is who knows what these crypto bros are doing? Probably after seeing FTX, it's all a scam, it's all bad. Let's shut it down. Let's debank it. Let's keep it as far away from people as we can. If you remember, Kamala's only public statement about crypto was we should protect crypto investments for black men. And that was the only thing she said during the entire campaign about crypto. Trump, very clearly, completely different instincts about crypto, which is that he's much more from the let it rip school. And caveat emptor, we'll see what happens, but people can protect themselves. And you can kind of see it from the project he's pushing of his NFT collection and his his DeFi project, World Liberty Financial. Clearly, he's not the kind of person who's going to be worrying too much about fools parting from their money. So I think we're in for a very, very big culture shift in the U.S. with respect to how investments and how something like the rise of DeFi and DAOs and all this stuff is going to be treated, at least when it comes to the executive branch.
So we've got 3 minutes left, and with that time, I'd like a quick lightning round of what your biggest wish for DeFi and DAOs for 2025 might be. I'm going to start. My biggest wish is that those involved in DeFi and DAOs learn the difference between private law and regulation, so that we can have more nuanced discussions about how you can mitigate risk using private law tools, even in the face of regulation.
My biggest wish is that we down-regulate how much we use DAOs and how much we use decentralized governance, and we focus more on smart contracts and permissionlessness, and focus less on the governance stuff, which I think is actually the weakest part of a lot of DeFi.
I think my biggest wish is engaging in more education, actually, and because some of the obstacles we have encountered are not necessarily particular to our industry. I think any new industry, fledgling industries, face these things along the way. It is part of growing up. And I would like to see more courses at universities, more courses for legislators, and I think just greater adoption of blockchain technology generally, because it can have a huge impact, whether it's DeFi, banking the unbanked, for instance, or whether it's supply chain, deepens, tokenization of real world assets, voting, healthcare. Really, the sky is the limit. I want to see more of that.
This is going to be an unpopular opinion, but and I know it's not the right thing, right term, but more regulation into DeFi, right? I kind of go the opposite way. I think I enjoy innovation, but I think maybe I've seen a little bit too much of fools partying with their money, at least for what I'm comfortable with. So tooling, transparency in that, but yeah.
For me, if you're a software engineer and you understand just how bad financial TradFi software backends are, it's really a joke. For example, one of the largest German banks, if someone on their website opens up an online bank account, there's literally in the back office, it gets printed out, and then someone has to manually type it into the COBOL system running on mainframes. And so DeFi, while for us is probably not that exciting anymore because we've been trading and then lending and borrowing and for years now, but it is actually incredible and it has the potential actually to really replace the financial backends. For example, I think the comparison between, decentralized exchanges are really slow, the NASDAQ can do 3,000 transactions per second. Actually, what you need to compare is it's 24 hours, because what a decentralized exchange does is trading, clearing, and settlement all in one, which, at the NASDAQ, that takes you 24 hours in total and involves 3 different companies with thousands of employees. And so I think it would be wonderful if even financial institutions, if that stigma is taken away, because it's ending now, but there's no way you could ever put any financial capital into any, in touch DeFi. You can just be in a Uniswap pool, etc. So there's still some challenges that you might be in a pool with a North Korean, right? So sort of KYC is maybe an issue, but I think it's a big cultural stigma. For example, when you see Larry Fink to this day, whenever he was in CNBC talking about the blockchain, he could not say blockchain. He would always say shared ledger. Right, so there is also this big just political taboo around this space, around on-chain, on public blockchain sort of activity. And so my wish is that now over the next couple of years, just people in their head actually, remove that stigma, and then, then there's certain sort of issues still to be addressed, like KYC, technically not really a big issue. But I think that's my wish, that you have a broader participation of even financial institutions in DeFi, because honestly, it's fucking awesome compared to this really, really terrible backend software of financial institutions.
With that, our time has come to a close. Thanks very much.
Thank you.